everybody, and welcome to Motion Design Hotline here. Thanks for hanging out on a fun Friday with us, chilling out. I guess it's noontime here, but earlier and later elsewhere in the world. Thank you for coming out. We have a guest this week.
Yay.
Dorca,
Hi.
thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. You are, I will say, perhaps the most professional of the people we've brought on the show. I don't want to throw any of our other guests under the bus, but this is kind of a big get for the show here. So, thank you for agreeing to hang out with a couple of dinguses for the day.
Yeah, totally, guys. One thing that I have to do here. I'll just
okay.
Yeah, I was feeling I was feeling a little left out with the background, so I may or may not have,
That's amazing.
looked for that background that Kyle has. And here we
Wow.
are. Hi.
I just want to clarify for the audience, this is genuine surprise.
Yeah.
Well done.
Our guests don't usually do bits, but this is fantastic. It's so good. Oh my God.
You're welcome.
Amazing.
I kind of love that the window, is adding some glow behind the curtain. It's really working out. Oh, this should be a permanent installation. I don't know.
I feel like maybe we're done. I don't know if we can top that.
Yeah, well, we've already nailed it. So for people out there watching, if you're not familiar, Dorca is a designer, animator, based out of New York, Emmy winner. If you're familiar with shows like Emmy award-winning Patriot Act, if you've seen that, but also graphics for MTV, BET, some event graphics that will really kind of blow your head back. It's kind of staggering to see kind of the level of work that you've kind of produced in your career. So, for those people out there who don't know, I guess in your own words, please tell the people a bit about yourself and whatever you'd like them to know, I guess.
Sure. I hope everybody's having a wonderful afternoon. Yeah. So I'm Dorca Musseb, as stated, and I'm a freelance motion graphics designer, animator. I have worked for mostly Showtime, Comedy Central, BET, MTV. Worked in some studios like Big Star, who does a lot of documentaries, and that kind of stuff. And I also worked at Patriot Act. I was there for a year. I started with the team from the first episode up until I left. I think it was cycle 4 when I left, and they've continued the show. And there's new people there, but it was a wonderful experience. Yeah, done a lot of different things, different stuff, mostly broadcast design, but yes, a lot of big names.
And so today we're gonna ask you some quandaries about the kind of technical and process of kind of working on that show and other things. But good people in the chat, if you have questions, lay them on us, and we will get to them. Things about what's the best place to get bagels in New York. We don't want to start too many New York-based problems on here, but we'll get to it.
Yeah, there's rivalries in the boroughs.
That's right. We try to have as many incredibly local references as possible, just to keep it normal. But I guess sort of to start people off, if people have not seen the Patriot Act program, I'll just kind of share my screen so that people can enjoy looking at some of this work from your website here that we have in front of the good people. And we've got these wonderful titles that, if people have not seen the program, there are these 3 kind of massive screens, and then the floor under Hassan is also like a big screen. Could you talk to us a little bit about some of the technical deliverables that went into producing the show? Because it's live in front of people, and then it's also filmed. People right now are gazing at some of the wonderful work in front of them. But I guess talk to folks about some of the challenges about this as a format.
Your audio. I am so sorry. Give me one second.
How dare you?
Put off. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the last part again? You wanted me to talk about
just about the deliverables in general and kind of what the format of graphics was for this show.
Sure. I mean, if you have 3 hours, we can go over.
Yep, absolutely. Let's get real.
Strap in, people. I would say, well, first of all, the screens. There's a particular people that worked on like getting the screens together, and I can like send that link as well. And I forgot to, but the screens are 8K. So we were working on 8K because the screens are very, very sharp and they're also very, very big. Some of the biggest technological things that we encounter was, we had to work on 8-bit. So it was like the gradients were a little hard to get, make sure that they were nice. Oh God, what can I tell you? We worked on the workflow went this way. We designed, we animated, and then we put it on a machine called the D3. And that D3 machine is a queuable machine that will then go on the stage. So we filter everything through a machine and a server because, as you said, the challenges of the show was also that it was being done live, right? So most of what you see is done on queues. This machine also has layers, so that if you go, for example, if you scroll up to the first, to my first sample in my website, and it's the Brazil title, you can see how the Brazil title is on its own, and then you have the stage behind it, and then when you see it on the stage, it has a background behind it, and that's because we worked on layers. So when you look at the show, the background, we will have about 5 or 6 backgrounds, and then we will switch the graphics on top using this machine. And the cues were laid out, and you will literally have a person going Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and that's the way that it will go. And the reason why we did that, when we animated and stopped, it was also because you have a performer, and the performer is going to want to feed off that audience, right? So you have to give him a chance to do what he does best, but still have the graphics behind him. So we worked tightly with the writers, we worked tightly with the person who was queuing these things, and a lot of tests were done to ensure that everything went from alpha to alpha. And like those are the most technical aspects of it. But essentially that's what was going on. Everything goes into this one machine, and then it goes onto the stage. So what you're seeing, a lot of people thought at first it was green screen. I'm like, no. It's actually
real.
It's real. It's on the screen with a live audience. And a lot of the challenges that we had a lot to do with color. Yeah, we started out, I think the first time it was something like the usual 7 colors for the show. And then I think at one point we had 77 colors on our gray color dynamic palette. And it was because of the nuances of the color needed to be there, because the screen is so sharp, but also because you have basically, you're looking at it on your Mac when you're designing, and it looks beautiful, and then it goes onto the screen, and you have lights on that stage, right? So the lights are affecting how those colors are being seen, and then you also have, the camera that's looking at it that's being also, just filming it. So you have several lenses looking at this thing, and then at the end of the day, it did go to a colorist. But the colorist was more worried about how the talent looked, and not So there was several layers of technical that we had to figure out. There was one thing that I'll say real quick about what happened, for example, between cycle 1 and cycle 2. So in cycle 1, we did the show. If you look at it, the very first episode is very plain and simple, and then it started building from there. But Netflix itself had a note for the show, and they were like, can we light Hassan more and not the audience? We don't really want to see the audience as much. So if you look at cycle 1, the audience was more visible. Cycle 2, the audience is less visible, and all those lights turned towards the stage, which bleached our colors out. So we had to work out the colors again in cycle 2, and there was a lot of like technical things that will happen that I think color was one of them. And then, the file rendering was another, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the reason why we were able to sort of like do as much as we did, because there was sometimes we would do loops, but we figured that out after. But most of the time we were animating and stopping.
So we talked about this a little bit before we went live here, but that obviously this is a large team of people that's required to coordinate something like this, both in planning and execution, and that there was a fairly significant like development time as well to put something like this together. Do you want to kind of talk about some of those?
Yeah. So before the show before I got hired or any of the 15 people in the team of graphics got hired, let's just be real clear about the amount of people that it took. And everybody brought something very special to the show at the beginning. That we all came from different backgrounds and we all brought something in that was unique. Because it was such a weird show, we needed people from different sort of sides, because I came from broadcast, but other people came from other places. But Michelle Higa-Fox, who was the creative director for the first cycle, she put in a year and a half worth of work along with Erica Gorchow and their team in order to get this show on the road, or to even sell it to networks. So there was a year and a half worth of work before we even got to where we're at. And before I even got hired, before anybody else got hired, they needed to sell it. So they put in, that's the reason why when the show came out, a lot of people were like, I worked on this and I worked on this. I said, well, how many people worked on it? A ton of people. Because there was everybody. Because there was so much development to be had beforehand. And you can go into Slanta Studios and Pep Rally Studios, and they have all of that preamble stuff that they did, and it was a year and a half worth of stuff. And then we came in and we developed the show. We started developing things from the very once the show was already like, this is a thing, this is going to happen. Let's get the team together, and we were putting together the show weekly. That was my role in this whole thing. But aside from that, there was also an archival team that gathered assets for us, and they also ran things through legal to make sure that the things that we were putting up there are legally able to do that. There was a news team that gathered and researched all of the data that we presented, like infographics or anything like that. The news team was the one that was actively making sure that all of the data and research was accurate. And that all needed to be, if you look at the show at the bottom, it always has where that data came from. It has, it always cites where that data came from.
Sources are important.
Sources, yes, very important. Yeah, make sure that everything is sourced. You had a writers team they were the ones that did the writing and the jokes and all of that. You had the graphics team, a production team, and a director. So there was a large amount of people to put this together. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess a follow-up from that is that with teams of that size, how do you keep any of that production like going? Because production, you're saying putting it together every week, like that's not a long amount of time. And if there are so many people getting a hand on it, like what kind of systems were in place to actually make things flow in the job?
Yeah, none at the beginning.
Perfect. This sounds relatable.
I mean, that's an important point. With something like this, it was a pretty unique thing. I mean, it still is. But yeah, probably one of those where there was a lot of figuring it out at the beginning, right?
Yeah, Michelle did a lot of that work. Michelle did a lot of that figuring out. She was the creative director for the first season. And she left it at a certain point, and then once the other creative director came in, he also figured a bunch of things out as well after. But the very, very beginning of it, even when you look back at the very first episode versus the second episode, already you see something different, because the very first episode, I think we kept everything very clean, and there was not like a collage-y type of feel to it that came later. So yeah, there was things weren't really in place. They were sort of like put in place slowly and, trying to figure everything out with everybody. There was a lot of long hours for sure, that people, myself and many other people put in to be able to figure these systems out. Once they were figured out and in place, then everything starts running smoothly. But it's sort of like working at a startup in a way. I equate it to that because there's a lot of figuring things out, definitely at the beginning.
Go ahead, Evan.
I wanted to pull something from the chat that people were talking about. Logan was saying that they find even animating in 1K to be difficult. Were there any challenges working with such a large format of screen that are unique to this, like the jump from HD to 4K, and then again the jump from 4K to 8K? Are there any sort of, I don't know, challenges or takeaways from that kind of jump in fidelity that were I don't know, hard to surmount, I guess?
Well, the most amusing thing I found was that, our creative director was always harping on us about aligning things. He was always there was a grid that he figured out, and he was like, stick to the grid, please, everything. And I was, okay. And then I went downstairs to see the screens, and then I understood the reason why he was harping so much on it, because if it's off by 1 pixel on a screen, that's several inches in a huge screen, is going to be noticeable. It needed to be very, very aligned and on point, because it was, once you were sitting there on that screen, it was definitely the sharpness of it. And you could see everything. You couldn't get away with a lot of the things that you see on the small screen. Sometimes you do things in the small screen, it's like, nobody's going to notice that, it's fine. And I didn't know. We all do it. We all do it. You can't do that when it's a big screen.
Never.
It's fine. Just put motion blur on. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you can't do that on a big screen. Especially, we couldn't really use a lot of motion blur. We stayed away from blurs, and we stayed away from sudden movements too. You can't really do sudden movements. And Kyle is nodding his head because he knows, on a big screen, or flashes or anything of that kind, because you will literally give people, a seizure. Yeah. They're sitting there and they're experiencing this big screen. So sudden movements are, especially when you're, I guess because of the topic that we were talking about, right? We needed to be very clear. We needed to be very concise. You have to consider what the topic was as well, right? What the show is about, and what kind of movements does that facilitate? I'll give you an example for contrast. We did big screen stuff for Times Square, for when I was at MTV, when I was at BET, at Comedy Central. We will often take over the Times Square building that was there and the screens and do things of that nature. And a lot of the times we'll get kickback from them and be like, you're using too many flashes. You're going to give people, we can get sued because people will get a seizure if they watch this on that big screen. So those things definitely have to be taken into consideration. You cannot get away with as much. You have to be really precise. You have to be really careful, and you have to be very accurate. That was one of the definite biggest takeaways as far as working with big screens and 8K goes. Again, because we didn't have to animate something like 2 minutes worth of stuff unless we were looping, and that came way later. We did, animate and stop, and it was not as many frames. We didn't have as much of an issue rendering. I think the IT department was right on point with us, because they knew that the show depended on the graphics a lot. So they were very much on top of things if we had any issues. You also used a HAP codec. In order to, sort of the compression, we use that for.
It's HAP. It's a flavor of QuickTime, for those that haven't heard it, which is pretty common in live production sort of situations.
Yeah. And so we use that in order to get the files into the server that would then be queued. So I feel like that was one of the most things. It was the accuracy needed to be there. You couldn't get away with stuff that you do in the small screen.
So something that ended up being a great lead into the thing that I wanted to ask about, which is so last week specifically, we were kind of showing some things that the context was that they were in a live theater performance, and these were sort of a virtual set for that. So it worked really nicely that leads into this week, because this is very much what you guys were creating, was a virtual set, which otherwise it's just a guy standing in front of some blank screens, but you're providing all of the context for what he's talking about. And that also has to all coordinate with how he's moving and the timing that he's delivering jokes and stuff. Obviously, like, a reveal and hold is an easy way to deal with that timing. But I don't know how much you personally, were involved with that, but if you just have any, I don't know, it's an interesting thing to think about, like how much coordination is involved in planning out not only what he's doing, where he's moving, where the camera's going, but also what the entire set is doing, since that's all, even though it exists, it's essentially virtual. You have to create all those spots where there's going to be empty spaces for him to stand in and things like that.
Well, that was the director's job.
Mm-hmm.
The wonderful director that we did have a wonderful director. He definitely was there was rehearsal, right? So there was a rehearsal on Tuesdays. They also the rehearsal also served to test out the jokes, what the audience responded to and what they didn't respond to as well. So it's like, do we need to have more impact into this joke? Do we need to change this or that? So that rehearsal was done. There was a stand-in that would do rehearsals, and then he would do the rehearsals as well. And they would tell him exactly where to walk to, where to go to, where he needed to stand. We also had guides where on the screen that it was like, stay away from this area. Don't put any faces here. Don't put any fingers pointing, etc. Because it's like, you will have this giant face behind him, So
and you didn't want to end up with like hands in weird places or
yeah. So we learned like where to stay away from, what to stay away from because of that. Because you're working. I believe you were working with 5 cameras. Yeah, 5 cameras, I believe. And one of them would be the tracking camera, so they would be moving. So you also needed to be conscious of that the graphics needed to look good on every angle, and what was happening behind him at every angle, and what was making that point. And that I wasn't as much part of as the art directors and the creative directors. Like the creative director would be the one like making sure that it was on point in those terms and what it would look like behind him. And there was 2, they don't call them art directors, I think they call them episode leads. So each one of them would take one episode at a time. So like while we were working on one episode, the episode lead was working on the next one. And they were working out the conceptual and how to tell this story. And at the beginning, I think we had a little bit more leeway in terms of the team members being like, well, I think we can express this in a better way this way. As time went along, we sort of like, okay, we now know. But it was also the writers coming in and being like, okay, here's what we want to say. What's the best way to say it? And I think the episode leads will then get back to them and be like, I don't think that's going to work visually. I think this is going to work visually better. So they worked very much in, as much as they could in conjunction to be able to create visually impactful things that will tell the story. So, later on, I think it was our jobs to sort of, and if we felt strongly that something wasn't working, or if we had ideas, we could definitely be like, hey, I think this will work out better. Or I don't see this happening. Or that joke, I think it would be more impactful if I do this instead. So.
Interesting trouble to try to make data funny, right? Or to make data engaging.
Yeah, definitely. Not just so with the data, yes, we needed to find a way to make it funny, and I think that the writers did a good job with that. I would say the biggest part about the data that we had to watch out for was the accuracy. So because we were using actual people's research that are doing this every day, they will screenshot it and tweet it and be like, hey, they used my data. And really excited.
That'd be right.
Right. So it needed to be right. We couldn't be like, that looks like 0.5. Sure. No, it had to be It had to be exceedingly accurate. So I was part of the team that came up with the templates for that, and making sure that through the worlds of expressions, the wonderful world of expressions, ooh, magic. We did a lot of making sure that the data was on point when it needed to be, and making sure, and it also needed to be. The one thing I would say, to everybody is like, we were working. Got to remember, we were working on a team, and the team was about 15 people altogether. And you have every type of designer and animator at every level. When I was making these templates with the coworker, like my coworker and I worked on these templates together, we knew that if we started something, somebody else was going to have to pick it up. So when you saw something on the screen, it had gone through like 5 or 6 people. You didn't really, like, you can't say this is my baby. It really does take a lot of people.
It's a group baby.
Right, it's a group baby. So we need, it's everybody's baby. So we needed, if I started something and somebody else was going to pick it up, we needed to make it really clear and concise as a template of what was happening and how to make it accurate. So if the news team came in and says, we're no longer using that data, we're going to change the data, the numbers have changed, please make sure that this is changed. Somebody had to go in there and make sure that the numbers were accurate. And we needed to make sure that those templates were very clear and very concise on what was happening. And it was easy enough to change those numbers. So I remember the line graph being one of them, where it was like, I really wish that I had Greg Stewart's point thing. When I saw it, I was like, I could have used that, because we basically had to put in the points ourselves. So Greg, get at me with those. Oh my God, it's just amazing. It works so well for data accuracy, because then, we had to like put in the numbers, and the numbers vary too, right? Because you had like minimum and a maximum that was different at all times, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a lot of figuring that out that I did, along with another one of my coworkers, Paris Glickman, who's I call her my expression wife. Because she would either do them and I'll test them, or I'll do them and she'll test them for me. And a lot of figuring out, a lot of templating and doing things from scratch, basically.
Definitely a great use case for expressions and rigs and stuff, when you have a thing that needs to move fast, be repeatable, but also flexible, and be ready to change at the last minute. And be able to be touched by several different people and all know what it's doing.
Yeah, one thing I did want to ask about some of the graphics. There's a lot of like arrays of things that we see in the work, like with the cricket bat scene in here, or with the there's a bunch of like what do you call those, Kyle? Guns? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, those are guns. That's what those are called.
America. See, he's not. I can tell you, America, man.
Yeah.
Also, I just wanted to point out, I flipped over to the YouTube stream on my other screen here to see what you were talking about, and then I tried to scroll down her page through the YouTube interface, which did not work.
Yeah, Kyle, you can't do that. You can't scroll through that. But something I wanted to ask about a lot of these kind of arrays of things, like, did you rig those up, or are these more manually controlled? Like, when I start working with arrays of stuff and I have to make a little change or a timing thing, it's very frustrating. I'd love to hear more about kind of the process of making these bits.
Well, here's the thing. So I mentioned before that we had templates, and the reason why we had templates was because we wanted to have like things that would repeat, like infographics that needed to be accurate, text, etc. All of those were templates so that we could make them easier and quicker. So we knew that things were gonna, it's a graph, use this graph, use that. But then the rest of the show was more lovingly made by hand. So like
hero pieces, maybe.
Right, yeah. Exactly. It was more, let's make sure that we take the time to do this. And that's the reason why we had templates, so that we can sort of like get those things done and out of the way, and the rest of the time we could spend loving these moments and instances that required a lot more attention. I myself worked in 1 or 2 fireworks, but what they call the firework moments. But I think other people like I know Yusef Cole definitely, and Brandon Sugiyama and other people made more bigger moments that you see on stage. And those moments would then be dedicated, like they will give them more time and more love that needed to be, to be sort of like custom made, essentially.
Yeah,
so
there's
there was
the
a lot
moments where Hassan really like steps out of the way of the graphics, right?
And yeah, exactly, because you sort of, for this show, you sort of had to see the graphics as sort of a co-anchor to him, sort of like we were telling the story along with him. So that's sort of like how we saw the graphics as we were making it. It's like we're telling the story with him and helping him make the point that he wants to make, right?
Kind of a dance of, most of the time you want to be there and be cool, but not too cool, because then it pulls focus. But then every once in a while, it needs to step forward and be the star. So,
and I think that's I think that's what the lead episodes were really, really great at. I think so I got to work with some incredible lead episode people that came in, and they each brought something in that was just amazing. It was just great to see how their minds worked, right, and how they interpreted things, and it was definitely taught me. I think this has been the most experience that I've had where I got exposed to so many amazing people, talented people that were working all together in this one place. So it was really special for me, I would say.
You've probably been on a lot of, you've worked at a lot of places doing like high profile content for this kind of network broadcast design stuff. So you probably worked on, I don't know, a lot of teams with a lot of great people. I don't know, like, I guess you probably don't have a lot of stuff to compare it to, because you mostly have just worked in New York and on some of these cool teams. But I don't know, just any thoughts about like that as opposed to, sitting by yourself in a room working alone on stuff?
You mean like now with the COVID?
Well,
Here in the now times.
In the before times too.
Yeah, I usually worked in teams of people. I usually have worked with, I think that now I'm starting to do more of my own thing. So it's only been lately that I've been like, okay, I think I need to sort of start gearing towards what I really feel more what I want to do. So I started doing more illustration and illustrated driven things. I'm at the beginning of it, and so I'm kind of young in terms of like doing more of that stuff, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm really having to rely on myself and being like, oh, okay, yeah, having to be more of my own art director. But also because I've been in teams, then I know I've learned from each art director that I've worked with and creative director that I've worked with what to watch out for and what to really look at in terms of like how is it looking overall, not just the nuances of the technicalities, but how is this looking overall. And yeah, maybe some technical stuff could be cool to try, but is it really telling the story as far as like what it needs to say? And I think that's more of like what creative directors and art directors do. So I would say that, learning from them about making sure that things are telling the story that needs to be told. As I said before, we mentioned before with Patriot Act, there was a certain story and certain things that needed to be told, and the movement of the things that were on the screen reflected that, right? It was very purposeful on the way that it moved, and I don't think that's something that people think about. Yes, this may look cool, but is it doing any service to the story? Mm-hmm. Right? Is it really fulfilling? And I feel like a lot of people talk about fulfilling the client's needs. This is what they mean. I can do something really cool technically, but does it really tell the story, right? Does it really, at the end of the day, say what the client wants you to say? The movement that you're going to have has to be purposeful. The design that you're going to have has to be purposeful in telling the story. When we first started the show, it was pretty blank behind him. Was it really telling the story? If you look at the first episode, it would told the story with him, but it was, eventually we started putting things in there to emphasize what he was saying. and there's a reason behind what we did. So when people study the design, the animation, and everything that you're looking at, it's not just about, looking at something cool that was done. It's looking at whether that's telling the story and how is it doing it and what the movement is doing to enhance that, right?
Roland just made a comment in the chat here. Feelings greater than number of keyframes.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, they're always talking about how this feels, right? So
I think that's a big takeaway that I think a lot of maybe younger designers need to get their head into, that there's a larger vision and the point of serving an end feeling rather than being so mired in the minutia of stuff.
I think a good thing to point out too is just because you're working on a project by yourself doesn't mean that you can't reach out to other people for feedback and for thoughts and stuff. So Dorca and I have been friends for a handful of years now. I'm trying to think exactly how many, but you're definitely someone that I push things to and like, hey, is this feeling okay? Like, is this, going where it needs to? And I think it's really important to reach out to some other people that do the same thing you do so that they understand the context. Because like your mom is always going to think this stuff is cool. She's not going to be able to give you like useful feedback, right?
That's very fortunate, Kyle. I'm glad to hear that you have such a great relationship with your mom.
My mom's very supportive, yes. But definitely get yourself a little network of other people that are in this same industry, even if it's whatever particular niche of it that you're in, so they can give you meaningful feedback on stuff. And that's a two-way street, and it's helpful for everyone. Just sometimes getting another pair of eyes on your work helps you point out stuff that you may have totally overlooked because you were so intent on making that little thing perfect that you kind of missed the big notes of like, is this even working, for the overall goal?
Or is it worth spending all that time doing something?
Yeah.
Sometimes we go way too far. Look, I'm a nerd just like you guys. I love this. Like, how did you do that? Is it worth going down this rabbit hole? Is it not? It's funny. We always call Kyle an unofficial member of the Patriot Act team because he was helping me out with some of the templates at one point. But yeah, always having a second set of eyes, sort of keeping you on track, right? It is harder now that we're sort of in our own little worlds and our own fish bowls, I feel, right? We're all in our own fish bowls, and it's a little bit harder. But as I said before, I'm trying to go more towards the illustrative side of things. So I started asking some questions of people that I know do this for a living. I started reaching out to them. This is the kind of industry that's very open. Animators and illustrators and the people that we work with in the motion design industry are usually very open. I mean, look at what you guys are doing here, right? Just answering questions every time, every week. I don't know of any other industry that does this, that is so open to be like, hey, yeah, here's how I did this. Here's a tutorial on how to do it. I would say don't be afraid of asking a person how did you get there? Do you think that you can give me feedback on what I'm working on? I would say that's really important to sort of get out of your own head as well.
And good questions are important there, especially I think in general, don't be afraid to reach out to, especially people that you look up to. A lot of people in the industry are very happy to answer questions. Make sure that you're asking good questions and not just what plugins are you using? Try to ask a question that actually has a real answer, and most of the time the answer is not just there's no easy button here.
There is a fart button though, Kyle.
There is a fart button. We have never gotten our soundboard going. We always talk about it.
Look, that's a lot of switcher problems that I don't want to get into.
I want a fart button.
Well, all you have to do. There was a time when the Staples business supply store sold something that was like an easy button. Yeah. You could very easily rewire that to make whatever noise you wanted, and then you just had a giant red button that just went. It was a great air horn, Pitbull style button to put on your desk.
I will say before we move on, just one more thing I would like to point out here, and that is like, don't get caught up in the tools, my friends. Like, there's one thing that I do not like about the industry, and it's the whole Mac versus PC thing. Dude, it's just a tool. At the end of the day, it's just a tool that's providing me how to do my work. It's just a tool. Doesn't matter which one you use. It doesn't matter what plugin. It's just a tool for you to get your work done. Focus on getting the work done well. And it goes all over. It goes from people, like I follow some people outside of the industry that are illustrators and painters, and everybody's like, what brush did you use? What pen did you? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Learning how to paint. That is the tool that we use.
It's a really interesting kind of symptom, perhaps. I don't know what the disease is, but it's a symptom that I feel is very unique in digital spaces, maybe. So I come from a family of more blue-collar people. Not once did any of them have a debate as to whether DeWalt saws are better than Ryobi saws, right? That has not come up in their lives, you know, in the thousands of cabinets and frames that my dad made. Never once did he bemoan, you know, any of that stuff, right?
Well, I bet probably, though, like professional tools versus like the cheapy generic one that, you know, is going to break after 2 jobs or something. So, you know, there's a balance, like tools that help you actually get the job done.
Right.
That is an important thing to discuss, but
it is. But I think people get too caught up in it, and I'm like, no, at the end of the day, it's like, does it really matter? Like, I think I'm seeing the end result, right? Also, let me bring my husband in here if you want to talk tools, because he's an engineer and he will be here.
I already know his answer is rigid, so we can skip all of that. I think we've hit kind of the 40-minute mark. Should we start getting through people's live questions we've got building up in the queue?
Yeah, kind of been trying to work some of them in just to the conversation, but and
we're very natural like that.
Daniel Herrera had a thing, and I don't want to frame this as if we're making it sort of the negative part of what we were just talking about, but was talking about Unreal and like real-time graphics, in the context of these live shows. Like, I know the Weather Channel did some really cool stuff last year where they were like visualizing floods and stuff around the hosts. I think we're going to see, continued development on some really interesting stuff there. These like real-time 3D environments that people can be in and stuff. I think, to bring it back to that conversation we just had, if that's what's appropriate for the context, if it helps tell the story, like it definitely does for the Weather Channel, and if that's the appropriate format for like the workflow that the show needs, then absolutely. It's all about the right thing for what you need, right?
What was it that Sage said in Jurassic Park? Just because you think you could doesn't mean you should, or something along those lines.
Pretty much.
That Sage Jeff Goldblum.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Our patron saint, Jeff Goldblum.
Our patron saint.
I think he also said must go fast, but
must go faster.
Sorry, yes.
If we're going to start pulling out Jurassic Park quotes, I'm going to have to get real specific here.
I don't want to be excommunicated. It'd be very hard for me.
Turn Evan off button.
I
can't do it. That's why I'm in charge of the switcher, so no one can take me away.
Let's see. So to go back to something that I thought Tristan had a good question here. So you mentioned earlier that there were guides and markers and stuff set up. Did those change per episode, or were they pretty universal?
No, they were pretty universal. There was certain
good.
things that, for consistency, right, is branding at the end of the day as well. When it comes to broadcast design, there's a lot of branding involved, and you've already built a brand, right? He's already built a brand that needs to be consistent. So there wasn't much changes in terms of like where things fell from the beginning. I think our creative director from the second season on, he came up with like this 64 pixel grid that was exactly where everything was, and he was very good about making sure that everything was in place. And we had a system as to the colors that were used. So For example, the episode lead would be like, here's the colors for the episode, and these are the colors that needed to be strictly used for the episode. And also they were chosen for the episode for a reason. Mm-hmm. Again, we go back to that. If the topic was X, then we needed to make sure the colors were these. If the topic was Y, the colors needed to be these. We needed to do that per episode. It was very specific. The colors told a story. They always do. It's not just, as I said, when we come, we talk about animation, we talk about the way it moved, but you also have to consider the color as well. It's also doing a job. Everything that you see on the screen is doing a job. It was very purposely chosen by the episode leads, by the art director, and by everybody. Like, okay, yeah. If again, it was a space that if you felt like a color wasn't really working, yeah. I think that we stayed away from using yellow sometimes because it would get washed out on the screen too much. So that was a color that was very purposely used in the backgrounds only for highlights, etc. But other than that, it was specifically chosen because of reasons.
Because reasons.
But these are things to think about in the grander, like more like sort of conceptual things.
So I know since we're getting towards the end here, we've talked about teamwork a lot as part of this discussion, and all three of us are people that run meetup groups. And obviously this is a little bit of a weird time for those, and we can't meet in person, but I don't know, thought it may be just a good time to have a discussion about like the value of those and why they're important. And, some of the things we were saying earlier, like finding other people you can rely on to give you feedback and stuff. But I don't know, any thoughts about what you do, and maybe tell people specifically what you're involved with?
Oh yeah. I'm a co-founder along with Emily Svanvich and Irene Filio of the Punimation, the New York chapter of Punimation. So Punimation was established in London first. Three friends got together, and B. Grandinetti, Lynn Fritz, and Hedvig Alberg, and they decided to put this group together. It's for women, trans, and non-binary animators. So it's like specific for a niche part of the industry, to support each other and to help each other out. We felt that there was things that we sort of like have to talk about. And the New York chapter started about 2 years ago. We started out with like 7 people, and now it's like over 200 to 300 members we have. It's kind of like word of mouth. And I've steadily I was doing monthly meetings. We were supposed to go to the botanical garden here with the lovely cherry blossoms.
We'll do it again someday.
Yeah,
it'll happen again.
Yeah, but we have, I've been running those meetings, and it's been interesting to see the relationships that have developed from it, the work that has developed from it. Yes, having other people sort of be like, looking at your work and being, hey, yeah, let's work together, or giving you feedback, etc. I think it's very, very important. It's been really great to have those and have people meet each other that wouldn't have otherwise known that they were there. In our case, but yeah, I think it's been really important to have those meetings and meet each other and know that one another is there, and know that you're not by yourself or alone,
I think it's really nice too for, I know my group is much more of we're kind of general video. So we handle, motion design, animation, as well as just like shooting with cameras and audio, being on set, all that stuff. But, we get people from all levels too. And so it's really nice to have, heavy hitter pros in addition to people who are just getting into it. And it's nice to be able to, both get that mixture, but kind of help provide people with, avenues to maybe reach out to mentors or network for jobs or all kinds of stuff like that, which is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in our case, it's like, I think we're like 20% of the industry only. and it's even less if you're like that's female, and if you're like non-binary or trans, it's even less. So we try to provide a space for people to connect at that level. And yes, we have anywhere from heads of studios all the way down to people who just graduated or that are still in school and are looking for help. And a lot of the time I would get like, oh, I didn't realize that there was this many people in New York City that were in this space. And I was like, yeah, we're here. And having that connection, having people connect at that level was really great. So we continue to do a monthly. We also have, well, I'll plug it in later if you want, but I can mention it, that we have Punimation.tv, which is like where you...
I put it in the chat already, actually.
Yeah. That where we have like all of the people there if you want to hire them. And that one is international, so you can search by wherever it is. And I think after the New York chapter was kind of established and we started like doing this thing monthly, then I believe there's chapters in Italy, in Berlin, and other spaces as well. I'm sorry if I didn't mention your city, but people started sort of like making the gatherings as well, and it's been really great. It's been a really positive experience, and really great to be able to lead that and be involved with it. So yeah, it's been.
Have you all been doing any sort of anything in the last 2 months here?
We have not. I mean, as I said, we were supposed to go to the botanical garden, but
it's definitely not the same. We've done one virtual meeting and we have another one coming up. It's fine, and it's better than nothing, certainly. But
I'm honestly still thinking about how to go about it. I'm honestly still sort of like thinking about how to make this happen, because the wonderful thing about online meetups, about meeting in real life, is that you get sort of like these pockets of people that kind of gravitate towards each other and they start talking naturally, right? And sort of have these conversations happening all over. Whereas if you're in a virtual setup, it's kind of hard to have that sort of naturality,
organic.
More organically attracted to like this person or that person. So I'm still trying to figure out how to go about it. And I'm not sure that I want to make it so formal where it's like, I'm here to talk about a topic, so it's just not, I haven't really figured it out yet.
Yeah, I mean, we all just need to get back on Second Life and wander around in the virtual space. Do that. Yeah, Kyle, you were mentioning, I'm part of MoGraph Mondays, operating MoGraph Mondays Ottawa. We've got Julie Kraft hanging out in the chat.
Yeah, Julie.
The founder of the head chapter of MoGraph Mondays. Holding it down in Detroit area. And then, Caitlin Kedge's in the chat as well, who's part of the greater New York area, like New York State MoGraph Monday. Certainly not New York City MoGraph Monday, but I'm sure we'll spread there eventually. Right after,
I'm sure she's allowed in there sometimes, though.
Right.
She's.
I don't know what if upstate people are allowed in the city. I don't know what the.
No, they're not. Caitlin needs permission in order to come over. She's had to ask me a few times. Can I? Yeah, there's written permission need to be had, and
papers.
Again,
please.
Listen, the boroughs be fighting. Just.
I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with where upstate ends and Buffalo begins, so I don't want to...
Anything above New York City is upstate.
Okay. That's how we know.
So maybe this is all a good lead in to... So how Dorca and I became friends, because we talk very regularly, mostly on Facebook Messenger. We exchange feedback on projects and expressions questions and stuff. Mm-hmm. But our whole relationship just started from you said you maybe even have screenshots of it, but basically kind of jokingly daring each other to make some T-shirt designs based on stupid After Effects hotkey puns. And that's why this exists.
Oh, good! You finally wore the Wotate shirt on.
I did.
Air.
Yeah, I came up with Wotate. Yeah.
I called your bluff. We were both like, "Oh yeah, that'd be funny." Ha 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 ha. And so I called your bluff and made the opacity one. And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. It's been like a good 3 years. And we finally met in real life at Blend.
At Blend, yeah. And then our spouses got to like have a vacation, by themselves. Well, we did Blend stuff.
Yeah, it was an exchange program.
Yeah. It's a spousal kind of daycare system where
Yes. It's like they both had to like wear the wrist things that kids wear,
Yep.
Yeah, we didn't want them getting into too much trouble.
Yeah, you just deposit them. That was in Vancouver at the time, right? Still.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just deposit them at the giant pixelated whale and pick them up later. It's great.
But
So, I don't know. It's a fun detail. Like, don't be afraid to reach out to people, and don't be afraid to follow up on silly jokes and stuff. I don't know. You never know. You might turn out to have really good relationships out of it. People that you end up working with. Who knows? Like, be cool and be easy to work with, and that tends to equal a lot of success in this industry, I've found.
Yeah. Just being chill has a high dollar value attached to it.
100%.
Because Kyle, you and I met at NAB like 2019.
Just last year, actually.
Yeah, and now we're doing this show together, which is weird.
Yeah, it's really is. You never know. I mean, I through Punimation, I did an event, and that's how I ended up at Patriot Act, because the event that we did had I made sure that everybody's work was up there, and they saw like people that were there that were head of studios were looking at people's reels and people's work and being like, so again, like it's important to sort of put your stuff out there. And if you happen to be an introvert, because I got asked this question not too long ago, I was talking to a class and one of the girls raised her hand and be like, well, I'm really shy, I'm an introvert, and so it's very hard for me to go to events or talk to people. And I said, well, usually there's a section of people in MoGraph that are super shy and super introverted, and there's a section that's super extroverted. It's sort of like a weird mix of both. There's no in between here. But from my friends that are introverted, from what I understand, what they do is they sort of carve out the time, because they know that that's going to take energy away. So they make sure that they like, okay, I'm going to spend an hour here at this event and no more. And then after that, they carve out time to wind down from it. Because it's just recharge, because that's how they work, and that's how they, so for those of you who are more introverted and more shy, just know that, put a little bit of effort in for X amount of time, have your time to recharge or whatever you need to do to center yourself again. And then you're still out there and you're still putting your stuff, you're still talking to people, because it's important to connect with others in this industry.
Very much so.
Yeah, this idea of putting your work out, I think, is really important. Like, if we don't talk about our own stuff, who's going to talk about it, right? It's
no one. Usually.
Right? Well, the idea of speaking into a void, I think, is something that a lot of people struggle with. And this idea that, if I want to be successful, do I need to have Instagram followers? Do I need to do all these things, right? Well, sometimes it's about a mass of people, but it's really about connecting to the right people and having not surface level relationships with people, but deeper level relationships with people. When I think to all the successful client interactions I've ever had, it's people who we mean something in each other's lives and in each other's work. So it's, I don't know, it's the sort of thing where you kind of have to take that risk and put yourself out there. Yeah. Speaking of social stuff, speaking of Instagram stuff, I want to, we've talked a lot about your past, but I think we should talk a little bit about what you're doing these days, because you've got a series of things that kind of just went live pretty recently, right? I think, which we can observe if we check out your Instagram. There's a wonderful amount of them kind of up right now that are very illustrator forward, we would say. So let's see. I'll just drop a link to that in the old chat.
I put one to the Instagram in general, and then looks like
thank you guys.
That's lovely.
But I want to just share screen and have a peruse of them currently, that so that people can kind of see what we're talking about when it comes to variety of work. The stuff that you've produced over the years is really breathtaking. That you work in many modes. So it's great to see a lot of this more Illustrator forward stuff on display, and a lot of it that is the motion is clean and sometimes more simplified, but the design of it carries, right? That even with minimal movement, it has the right amount, right?
Yeah.
If that's the right way to say it, that it doesn't have to be overwrought to be effective.
Absolutely not. And not to belabor the point, but like it's sort of like, is it telling the story? Is it coming across? Is what really is about. With these new things that I've been doing for Interaction, they have a bunch of this giphy.com/interaction, and they've been putting up a lot of things about, it's more socially conscious stuff and that kind of related things. And they approached me, and I wanted to sort of start going into more of an illustrative direction. So I was like, perfect, yes, I will do this. And I gotten to work with them, and they're wonderful to work with. I'm working with the art director that I used to work at MTV and Showtime. So we already, like that relationship is, as I said, relationships that are going to be like, people will eventually be like, oh, can we work together again? And that's mostly what this like industry is about. It's like, so I ended up working with her again, and we've been doing some more illustrative stuff. And again, to make that point across, what's more impactful? I think the last one in there is all black and white. Mm-hmm. It's completely black and white, and there's minimal motion, but I felt that the black and white was impactful enough to make the point, and it was very strong. And so they've asked me to make a couple of those already with the same design, because they felt it was impactful enough and they wanted to make that point again. So I ended up making a couple of others that were of the same design or the same nature, and it doesn't have as much motion in it.
One thing that I wanted to talk, I know we're running a bit long, so hopefully you've got time to hang with us. That we've seen your work up on 8K giant screens, and now this work is maybe the smallest screen, right? This is the smallest screen. It's on your phone. People are literally going to observe it, like it'll be an inch size, as a postage stamp in their feed as it goes by. And how, I'm wondering if you just talk a little bit about kind of the contrast and what is the same and what is different between these two mediums.
Between the two, again, the impact that you're going to have is going to inform the design of the animation and how you're going to move. And also, like, okay, so when I was working in 8K, I needed to make sure that the animation was a lot slower. I do make sure that my animation reads. That's the same thing. At the end of the day, it's like you have to make sure that things are reading correctly, and that is going to make that impact, whether it's through color or through animation choices. How it's going to burst into somebody's eyes is going to be the thing to watch out for, and what the impact is going to have. Whatever the movement is going to be informed by that. And when it comes to the postage, it's very small. So make sure your color, and also I'm doing GIFs, which is really limited in color. Yep. It's limited in the I can't really do gradients a lot, because they will come out really scuzzy looking.
Textures usually no.
Textures and be careful with this. So there's a limitation. It's always a limitation regardless of how big the screen is or how small the screen is. You have to work with those limitations and come up with ideas that will be just as impactful. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, because I know there are a lot of people who in the chat, have a lot of their Insta game they would like to increase. They want to get those follows or whatever. They want to play the Insta game, and it really is like to differentiate from other things that are going to show up in people's feeds, right? We got to grab attention when next to perhaps many similar things, or maybe things that are highly different. So it's
I don't have a ton of followers, so I really don't. But
we can change that today. We'll see.
That's right.
I've seen a couple people specifically say like, "Wow, awesome work! I already followed you."
Yeah, and
literally tens of people.
Tens of people. As far as like you mentioned that my work is like I have a wide range in terms of what I do. I'll be 100% honest. I get bored if I'm doing it.
You're probably not alone in that.
I get really bored if I'm doing one thing for too long, and I'm the type of person that always is very curious, and I'm always trying to learn something new, which is the reason why I take so many classes and things of that nature. Lately, I've been taking a lot of actually Ben Marriott's class in School of Motion's illustration class, and all of these things. Is I'm always sort of looking for something that will tell the story maybe in a different way. I just like to have a wide variety of things always. It's my preference, but there's some people that are very specific. I'm more of a generalist in that sense.
Yeah. Which, being a generalist is not a bad thing. It's in many
kind
cases.
of its own specialty, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I think, Kyle, you and I are also very, very generalist.
Generally speaking.
Right. Sure. I'm not going to engage with that word anymore.
What else?
That joke.
Yeah. So I think that'll do it for the show today. Thank you so much for hanging out and staying with us and tolerating Kyle's puns here at the end. So
well, she tolerates them a lot. So
okay, you've become
pretty easy today, I think.
I'm not. I mean, did we not say we met because of Wotate?
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you're encouraging his puns. I see. So before we let you go, is there anything that folks should check out? Of course, your Instagram. Or are there any other anything you'd like to plug while you're on the show?
My Instagram is DesignAnimatorDorc. I think you guys put a link to it. There's also a recent podcast that I did with B. Grandinetti and Emily Svanvich about animation for Free the Work. Which is Free the Work is for people. It's more for the film industry. And it's for people to enhance diversity in the workplace in the film industry. But they wanted to know more about animation since live shooting is not happening right now. So we did a podcast with them. I can provide that link.
I think I just got it. Boom.
Yeah, so it's Free the Work podcast, and we talked about animation and about the industry as a whole when it comes to the whole 20% thing. Yeah. So if you want to give it a listen.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And Kyle, since you're also on here, is there anything that you want to plug while you're here?
Yeah, I should mention Post-Production World Online, which I know I've talked about a time or two before. We had Iran on a few weeks ago. So Post-Production World obviously was not able to happen in Las Vegas this year, but it's an online event that's happening this Sunday through Tuesday. So there's a bunch of really great online sessions, and as part of registering for it, you also get recordings, access to recordings of everything. So if you're looking to learn some stuff, be a good thing to do. I'm talking about expressions and shape layers. So ppw-online.com.
Okay, so there you go. It's a hyphenate thing. And of course, I do stuff on this channel and doing stuff on Behance, Behance this weekend. So check that out. But yeah, follow everybody on the social things if you want more of them in your life. And more specifically, just reach out if you got questions. We're all friendly people. You've seen it right here. But yeah, I guess that'll do it. Thank you so much for hanging with us, and thank you, good people of the chat, for coming out and being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a blast.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, next time we'll probably just play Dungeons and Dragons on here, but other than that, it'll be totally normal. But yeah, that's about it for us. Thank you all so much for hanging out. We'll be back with you next week with more of the Motion Design Hotline. I don't really know what we're doing next week, so we'll probably figure it out. But as always, please use the form in the description to send us your questions so we can enjoy them ahead of time and appear much more prepared and together. That's pretty much it. Thanks again, and bye for now.